Good evening. The May 2025 meeting, the Alamance County Planning Board will come to order. I've got the roll. Have you got the roll?
Yes, sir. We have a quorum to conduct business.
All our children got the roll. Don't have anybody signed up for public comments, so we'll just rip right off with old business.
You want to approve the minutes first?
No, but we can. Does everybody have a chance to read the minutes?
I have a couple of just notes, and I can give my copy to Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
Under public comments, it might be, it says Mr. Philip Morgan said he had
He had
prepared.
not prepared, yeah.
I was going to, I couldn't remember. But, yeah.
You said you had not prepared any official comments last time when you spoke.
Yeah, that was just something I thought I should say. I didn't do it today, so I don't gotta worry about it.
On the second page, second from the bottom paragraph, he said he created, I thought, a new use for, was it agricultural food operations? Oh, that was
I
the
think-
use.
I thought it was food operations incidental to, or, well, maybe it was.
Maybe that's worth a check. 1, 2, 3, on the third page, I thought the second paragraph regarding the definitions in old business, I think you already said, I thought that was just maybe redundant. You had already said something about that. Where was that? Maybe it wasn't. Okay, I take that back. It just seemed like that paragraph you had already talked about it earlier up there.
Oh, okay.
So, but I'm not seeing the half mile. Yeah, it's on page 2 in the second paragraph, where you talk
Gotcha.
about the home-based businesses and the family care
Yeah.
homes and added half mile separation. So I just thought that might be more
And I think
obvious.
I did kind of repeat myself a little bit there
Okay.
because we talked about the changes in the table of uses and then we talked about definitions.
Okay. Those are just my suggestions, but yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Motion to approve the minutes with the changes.
Second?
Motion is second. All in favor, aye. Opposed? Nobody's gonna skip over it now? Just see if anybody's paying attention. Now, old business.
Thank you, sir. So I don't have anything new prepared for this. I have not engaged in any changes to the draft ordinance since the last meeting. If you recall where we picked off, where we left off, it was just an opportunity for the board members to take the ordinance home, pour over it, make some comments, critiques, questions. I did get a set of draft changes from Mr. King, but if you guys have any points or comments at this point, then now is the time to dig into it.
I do.
Okay.
Look at, Matt, look at page 3 in that old business packet. It's a minor thing. Okay, so where it says employment center, you got DC, you probably should be EC. That's a very simple thing. Page 3 of this is the 5.4 land use restrictions.
Oh, I see. Okay.
All right. We talked a little bit about page 5, but we never came to any type of conclusion. What we talked about on page 5 under 5.42 was residential cluster subdivisions in the ag district of being 8,000 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
About it possibly being larger than 8,000 square feet in that one particular area. I would like to open up to the board to discuss this, and possibly it should. It would be my recommendation, at least to discuss, to go to 15,000, 16,000 square feet, something like that. I just want to ask the board how they feel about that for the ag district. If you don't feel anything about it.
So you mean basically increasing the minimum lot size for cluster
For the
subdivision lots?
Right, for the residential cluster subdivision from 8,000 square feet or to go to 15 or 16,000 for the agricultural district. I'm just asking the question if it should be done.
I think it certainly can. I know the 8,000 figure, I believe, is just based on the science of being able to connect to a public or community water and sewer system, right?
I don't think we have any input to that 8,000 number.
Is that something that just kind of comes down from either the state or common practice on connection to public water and sewer?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
How often does that happen? I think
Since I've been here, we've approved one major subdivision with lots that were as small as in the ballpark of about 8,000 square feet. I think they were probably closer to 9. And then they did have Orange Alamance water, and then they did have off-site septic systems. But it was one large major subdivision of I think about 175 lots.
okay. That is that likely going to be closer to an urban
Yes,
area?
yes. Especially for public water and sewer.
I think, as we talked about this, Henry, in some meetings prior to when we were talking about the cluster, and the one thing that we went to the 8,000 square foot was that when they done this cluster, would be able to allow, like you, had a particular lot that was setting this away, and you could put a home in the cluster. But then the next one over here may be 16 or 17, because just the demographics of the land itself. It was give some latitude to the subdivision, so that you could possibly go down to that low of a number to meet the criteria of that subdivision that cluster. That's, and if you remember that too, don't you? Is that pretty much? I mean, that's one of the reasons is one it's slow versus a 16 or even larger. Was just to allow some latitude, even in the agricultural district. When you're doing these clusters.
Yeah, and so we'll get a little bit more into that when we get into the proposed changes for the subdivision ordinance. But the draft that you'll see has what we call a conventional subdivision, which would just be all lots have to be the minimum of that size in that district. The cluster option, which we're talking about with smaller lots and reserved open space. But then the density option, which I think is what you're referring to, where you may have, and based on the draft, there would be no requirement for a shared open space. But you may have a very small lot right next to a rather large lot, but the average of the lot sizes meets the minimum of that district.
Right.
That's what I think you're referring
Yeah,
to.
that's where,
Yeah.
and I think that's where I guess the minimum lot size of 6,000 is where, 8,000 is where we came from.
Right.
To give that latitude inside those cluster subdivisions.
Right.
But that's,
Okay, if the board doesn't support it, that's fine. I just thought I would bring it up. It
I-
concerns me.
I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I don't. Actually, I'm not sure that we'll get many lots that are 8,000 square feet. It'd be more likely that you're going to get 15,000 or maybe half acre with well and septic, but
with the cluster, you won't have a well and septic.
Right. It'd be water.
It'd be water and sewer.
Right.
it'd be good. Now, how many areas in the county do we have water and sewer availability?
Well, public water and sewer is going to be, basically right around the cities and the ETJs, and from what I understand, almost as soon as they extend any public utilities, they figure out a way to annex that property.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of few and far between, and I think we have 3 or 4 community water systems throughout the county. The village of Saxapahaw, for example, is on their own water system, but I'm not sure how much room they have for growth. So it's
I
not.
think they've got more room in water than they have sewer.
Mm. sounds
as far,
about right.
as far as their
Yeah,
system.
that sounds about right.
So, what you're saying in round generic numbers, at 8,000 feet, if you land laid off and it worked, and you was on existing roads, you wouldn't have to take up road space, you put 5 houses on an acre, every third acre you gain a house. So in other words, in 3 acres, you put 16 houses. That's how the math works on this. And what you're proposing is to cut that back to 2 or 3, so that you had 2, and then you gain 1.
Yeah, there's not as many houses for the ag district classification.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
Well, and when you look at a house on 5 acres of land, or a house on 2 acres of land, versus 5 houses on 2 acres of land, some folks might say that qualifies as dense. And then that would qualify as clustering when you take those 2 extremes and compare them. And if you had the corresponding open space with that, I wouldn't have a problem getting my head around that if everybody else is agreeable to it. I don't think it's a bad idea. And at this point, all we're doing is just put the words on paper and
Right.
trying to get it sorted out, so I'll let everybody else speak for themselves. At least please, everybody here.
So in the ag district, what are you seeing that 8,000 go to?
Let's say 15 or 16. Let's say 15,000 per acre.
Okay, I got you.
Just in that one category.
Correct, yep, I wouldn't see personally have an issue with that.
Okay.
Would you, so the cluster subdivision comes with a requirement for a dedication of open space. Do you envision changing that at all? If the lot size is essentially going to double, do you envision changing the ratio of open space?
I haven't considered that particular
Yeah.
criteria.
Yeah, I think that's the thing on this cluster subdivision, is that you gotta have, and I don't remember the actual acres,
The draft that we'll talk about later is 25%.
is you gotta have that much open space. So, I guess, in essence, what we're trying to do here is appease the builders so that, you know, we've got some latitude of smaller size, but they would have to have a community water and sewer system to accompany this,
To be able to use that option.
be able to use this option.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, just so I'm clear,
Yeah.
that's not what's written here, right? All cluster subdivisions are not required to have community water and sewer per this, are they?
I don't know if that is explicitly stated in the
I think,
zoning ordinance, but that is, I think, explicitly stated in the subdivision ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay.
If it's not, I will make sure that it is, but I'm pretty sure that it is. I
don't
think it
see
says,
in here.
if I remember correctly, the
Explicitly.
language talks about requiring connection to public or community
Okay.
water and sewer.
And maybe I'm overlooking it, I don't.
The ultimate goal is that the two ordinances really speak to each other, and they work together. So there's ideally some cross references for things like that.
A little less than actually.
Well, this,
Yeah. Yeah. It's more like
16,000.
I also noticed here that the open space may be your off-site septic area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, half acre. Yeah, it's 43,516 square feet.
And I think we've talked about that before when you guys are here for a meeting. If you have like a community offsite septic area, it can double as a park. It can double as a recreation area.
Okay, I see,
Be able to do
I see the
anything.
types of
Exactly.
subdivisions says that they'll have water and sewer, but the definition of cluster doesn't necessarily. So I don't know if that's worth repeating in 6.9.14.
Are you looking at the rural preservation ordinance, or are you looking at the subdivision ordinance?
That's
I
right.
don't know what I'm looking at. I'm looking at papers you handed me.
The type of utility serving it is what you're looking at.
That's a good non-answer, isn't it? Let's look what I'm looking at.
I don't have an issue with the 16,
Or 15.
your 15 or 1600. I was just looking at it.
Okay. So if you look at, we're not quite there yet. This will be the draft subdivision ordinance on page 40, under major subdivisions, types of subdivisions.
Right, that's what I was looking at.
2B, cluster subdivisions, small as 8,000 square feet.
Right, so it says it
Which
here. It
are-
says under 2B, but it doesn't necessarily say it under 6.9.14. And I'm just
I see,
thinking,
okay.
I'm just speaking from a layman's terms and ease of reading. That somebody look here and say, "Oh, I can do this," and then over here it's just,
You're saying that requirement's outlined in that part?
Yeah.
It's not expanded on in the actual section dedicated to
Yes,
talking
I'm
about.
just
Okay.
speaking from frustration in other ordinances and other areas.
I get it.
Okay.
Did you also try to go review your license today?
We can make sure we add that.
Excuse me?
Prompted his frustration.
No, I have my real license like my company. I'm just saying go to Raleigh and try and get a building permit. You'll understand my frustration.
Mr. Chairman, is this something I need to put into a motion, or is this just open discussion? How do we handle this?
If you wanna make it into a motion, that's fine. If you wanna run it around the horn and make sure everybody's kinda got a clear thought on it. Well, do we kinda agree with what he's saying?
You gonna do 15 or 16?
15.
15.
Make a motion, let's see what happens.
I make a motion that in that particular agriculture district, 5.4.2, that the residential cluster subdivision goes from 8,000 square feet to 15,000 square feet.
I'll second that.
Got a motion and a second to increase the minimum lot size in cluster subdivision in agriculture district, make 15,000 square feet. Is there any discussion about that? Everybody understand what we're talking about?
Are we just picking a number or,
Yes,
okay?
that's what it is.
I mean, does that translate to anything in life?
No, sir. No, ma'am.
Okay.
Matthew, do you feel like that this would be a deal breaker to move this to 15?
I don't necessarily think it'll be a deal breaker. I would caution against making the change kind of in a vacuum. I would think about some type of offset, some type of consideration of the required open space. Like I said in the draft, I've got 25% of the land. It may be worth thinking about it in terms of if you're going to increase the lot size, should you kind of offset that open space to make a little bit more sense. And I hadn't really planned on getting into this necessarily, but there is a draft piece of legislation in front of the General Assembly that has bipartisan support that I think would require, if properties are, if parcels are on public or community water and sewer, that the local government has to allow for a density of between 4 and 6 residences per acre. And I wonder about the 15,000 square foot jeopardizing that metric if that becomes law.
Is it 4 or 6, or is it?
Between 4 and 6.
So we could
Right now,
5 or 6.
Right now, the math on the 8,000 square feet comes out to 5.3 residences per acre.
5.45.
Okay, sorry, 5.45. And I'm just not good enough at the math to think about what the 15,000 would be. 3 or
15 would be
2.9.
2 point something.
Yeah.
2.9.
Yeah.
So that's kind of hypothetical because it's not law yet, but it's coming down the pipeline. And something that you, Tom, I'm sure you're familiar with it. Michelle, I know you're familiar
I don't
with
worry about it until it's done.
it. Yeah.
That's why I don't worry about it.
And there's another variable that this is just
Get out there.
discussion around the horn tonight. We're not making recommendation to the commissioners on this for a while, so there could be 2 or 3 changes that occur between now and actually getting something done.
Yeah.
Now, if you did 4 houses per acre, that'd be 10,890 square feet. So it doesn't get you to 15, but it's more than 8. As far as mass is concerned.
Matthew, just,
Absolutely.
so if you make this change, it's gonna put you in, contradiction of what your other public water and sewer lot size is. It's already at 8,000.
Right.
So if your cluster subdivision is gonna be a community water and sewer lot, and you make it 15 or 10 or whatever, it's gonna be in violation of your other lot size, correct?
Well, but the entire set of regulations would set new minimums. So the agricultural district, for example, would be 5 acres for a conventional subdivision. It would set new minimums across the board.
And he's only, if I'm not mistaken, you're only talking about doing that change to 15,000 within an ag district.
That's it.
Yeah, not across the board,
No.
just in that particular district.
Just that one area.
So the other districts could have
Yes.
lots as small as 8,000 square feet.
Yeah, just that one area. That's all I'm after. That's all I'm proposing.
So if that goes just to that one ag district, does that have a conflict with that 4, 5, or 6?
I would assume so, yeah.
So that 4, 5, or 6 houses per acre has to be an option across any district.
I would need to do a little bit more research on the
But you see-
proposed legislation, but yeah, I think it could be. I think basically what the intent of the legislation is, if there is a lot connected to public or community water and sewer, then the local government has to make an allowance for a density of between 4 and 6 residences per acre, which would come out to be about 8,000 square feet.
So is a community well and septic also considered a public?
Public or community.
Okay, public.
Yeah, and I think the definition of a community system is 15 connections or more
For water
for
system.
water.
Henry, I like what you thoughts is, but I believe that the 8,000 would work better because like you said, we're picking up, open space. And if we change this up, we're gonna have to go back and change back, and we're gonna have as much open space as we would with this 8,000. And I like to I would rather see the open space stay as large as it is, and that allows folks to do this cluster within the ag district. I think this would work better than, I understand what you're saying, it would be, but when you start adding it to 15, you gotta go back and take off of this, and I'm just hypothetical, you gotta go back and take off of this 5 acre open space that we've got and reduce it down maybe to 4 acres. Now, this is just hypothetical, there are no numbers, but just, am I saying it right?
Well, as his motion was presented, it would not alter the open space at all. So
I know, but I mean, in the end number, at the end game, it could.
it could. I mean, I guess hypothetically, it would force people to either make fewer lots or choose larger properties to subdivide.
We're trying to give an option here of allowing some kind of type of subdivision inside the ag district. That's just,
I mean, in
My
theory,
thought.
you don't have to change the 25%.
Right.
You do whatever you want to do.
You can leave the 25 as is.
You can leave
And
the
the lot
25
size.
as and up the lot size in the agricultural district
Yeah.
only.
Yeah. You just presented maybe changing to 25%.
Yeah, I
If-
just
if you-
mentioned it as something to think about, as just kind of an
But we don't
offset.
have to consider it.
Right, but you certainly don't have to.
8,000 is pretty small.
Yeah, maybe that's worth mentioning too. So that's 8,000 exclusive of what the ordinance calls marginal land. So marginal land is going to be land taken up by the right of way or any kind of an easement or anything prone to flooding. Excuse me. Anything that's basically not buildable. So an 8,000 square foot lot is going to, it's like impossible to really get 8,000 square foot lot. You have to include some
Well,
factoring for right of way or other easements.
Yeah, I think from the building side of that, because that doesn't change your setbacks or anything within that.
It's really just.
And what buildable space on
But
8,000
if you
square
went to
feet?
11, that
They
goes
give you
over.
5 or 4 acre.
Yeah.
Houses per acre.
I mean,
Lawnmower
with,
shed.
with lots of size, when you're building on them, you almost have to have the setbacks on the side be a combined 15 feet, not 15 feet each or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, 10.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to envision what.
got my
what that looks
mathematician
like.
over here, he's
We'll see
working.
that. I just have that.
If it went to 1,100, that would give you a minimum of four.
11,000.
11,000.
11,000.
Really just
Yeah,
shy.
I said
10,000.
11,000.
A quarter of an acre.
That would give you
ish.
4 houses on an acre.
That's still pretty tight for the ag district.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's in this cluster thing too.
Let me ask you about the open space. Now, who manages the open space? So subdivision, the open space, you got the open space when you build the houses or whatnot, but who manages and stipulates that open space as far as caretaking of the open space?
Yeah,
It's
that's
you, the
an
homeowners.
excellent question. Yeah, so
It
basically
has to be
that,
the homeowner
Because
association.
it has to be deeded to somebody else.
Okay.
correct, yeah.
Just asking the question.
Now, what happens if they say you put roads in the middle of it and they're gonna put sidewalks on the roads, or and then that turns into an easement? That's the-
15,000.
Yeah.
Who gives us how many houses?
I envision that the maintenance of that and the perpetual use being similar to like a private road agreement, where all of the property owners within the subdivision are bound to mutual maintenance.
But then you can't use, let's say, a sidewalk in front of someone's house as an open space because of the way this is worded.
So, it doesn't figure over here. Got my mathematician working. At 15,000, that'd only give us 2.9 houses per acre. And if it come down to what this law is, we need to figure this thing up to where we'd be at least at 4. So we'd be on the very lowest end of it.
But if 11,000 square feet is what gives you that, I'm okay with that.
That'd
So
give
Tom
us-
has a good point. Maybe we don't worry about it till it becomes law. I
Okay,
just
I
thought,
mean, it's just
I
gonna
know,
change.
you know,
I just thought it was worth
You're trying to
mentioning.
be a little proactive here, you know.
I just thought it was
But
worth
it's gonna
mentioning.
change
On the front
like 10
side.
times.
I still
We don't
prefer,
know
I still
what's
prefer
gonna
the
pass.
15,000. And that's the motion I've put.
All right.
Oh, that's fair enough.
I'm gonna stick with that motion.
All right, we through talking about it? So I see us as having 3 choices, and one of them just been nixed. Mr. Chandler could rescind the motion, and that would make it go away. We can vote against it, that would make it go away, or we can vote in favor of it, and then we've got this on our books, but it stays with us until such time that we either finish this work and pass it on to commissioners, or they do something in Raleigh, and then either we're in compliance with them or we're not. Now, does anybody see any other options of us having right now?
We got a motion on the floor, I guess you.
And a second, and we're getting ready to do something with it.
I'm sticking to the motion.
Okay, all right, so the motion's been made and seconded, we've discussed it, is everybody clear in their mind what we're talking about? All in favor of 15,000 square foot minimum in the agricultural district only? Say aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
So it's 3-2, motion carries.
And just to clarify, that's for cluster subdivisions only in the
That's-
agricultural
that's
district.
correct.
Cluster
that's
in the
correct.
ag district only. And it stays in this room until we get through with this corporate work and pass it on to the commissioner, or until something happens in Raleigh that supersedes. Okay,
I follow you.
all right.
And I've just got one more thing, I don't think it's gonna take this long. So,
Don't say that yet.
yeah, well, don't say it yet. So, on page 16, I want to just challenge one thing on page 16. You go down to institution uses, community and government services. It says college, university, or vacation school as permitted in rural residential and special use in rural community. I just think those two should be flipped. Because your rural residential is supposed to be your lesser density population, and your rural community is a little higher, and I just think those two boxes should be flipped, in my opinion.
Okay. So again, that's on page 16, under the institutional uses, community and government services. Colleges, universities, and vocational schools. That's on the 4th line. Permitted in rural residential and a special use in the rural communities. And you want to just basically flip it.
Yes, sir. It makes sense to me.
So you want it, I'm sorry, Mom. Say that again.
Okay, so on the college, university, and vocational schools,
Uh-huh,
for rural residential, it's in there now, it's permitted.
okay.
And on the rural community, a special use permit. And I'm asking for those two to be flipped, where it takes,
Makes sense.
Okay.
That makes
it
sense.
just makes sense to me.
Yeah, I follow in.
So it's permitted in the community, but in residential, you gotta have special use permit.
That's my,
Yeah.
yes,
That's your proposal.
yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
That makes sense to everybody else?
I'm sorry.
Do you want us to make a motion on this officially, or you want just consensus that we're just gonna flip it?
I think consensus is fine.
Does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. There you go.
I have nothing further.
You're right, it didn't take as long as the other one.
All right. Any other changes or comments, questions about the overall ordinance? Tom, do you want to summarize any of what you had emailed to me? You
No.
just want to leave it in my inbox.
Leave it in your inbox.
It's a no.
I wouldn't be prepared.
I will note that, I don't remember if this is during the last meeting or since then, but at the very end of the table of uses for industrial uses, manufacturing, extraction, landfill, etc., the reference on all those is wrong. It says Article 9, Part 5. It should say Article 6, Part 5. So I'll be sure to make that change. And there's a few other minor typo errors throughout.
We're gonna have a consensus agreement to allow you to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on this old stuff?
No, sir.
New stuff?
New business? Sure thing. So really the only new item on the agenda tonight is the draft subdivision ordinance amendments review. Just kind of a disclaimer before we get into it. So this is very, very similar to what the board had considered last year. This is a very similar draft to what we presented to you guys. I believe it was last June or July. And then that was deadlocked with a 4-4 vote. And then the very next meeting, I think you guys had proposed the 2-acre minimum that then went before the commissioners in September of last year. So I'm just going to give you summaries. I'm just going to kind of go through this the same way that we have the proposed ordinance changes since the beginning of 2024. This is formatted so that new text is underlined and old text has a strike through. And in terms of formatting here too, you'll see that entire sections have a strike through and their replacements have the underline. So in the beginning there, added an index just for organizational purposes and make that consistent with the rest of the document. Section 6.9.1, this would now be the purpose and goals. We swapped out the old section for this. This section just sets the table for why this ordinance exists, what the county is trying to accomplish by enacting these regulations. And this talks more about preserving agriculture, preserving the rural look and feel of the county. Some of those goals that were the result of the lot size subcommittee from last year as well. 6.9.2 swapped out the old section for application and regulations. To me, this would be a big accomplishment because this finally defines what a subdivision is in our ordinance, and unfortunately, we currently don't have that. 6.9.3 is basically an exact copy of the current 6.9.1 that outlines the exceptions to applicability, and that essentially matches North Carolina General Statute 160D-802A. 6.9.4, I'm just going to thumb through as we're going. We've got a lot of strike through there. The vast majority of the current ordinance is in 6.9.4. The new section features existing language from the current ordinance, but it places it closer to the beginning of the document since it comes after the sections that detail what a subdivision is and then what are the exemptions to the ordinance. This section essentially tells the subdivider that an approved plat does not automatically guarantee approval for building permits, nor does it automatically mean streets are accepted into the NCDOT system, for example. 6.9.5, this section simply allows for subdivision variances and appeals, and it is directly in line with state law and Board of Adjustment procedures in Article 2. 6.9.6, the aggregation of lots. This is also taken directly, or more or less directly, from state law, and mostly deals with like the phasing of subdivisions. 6.9.7 simply spells out the consequences for violating subdivision regulations, and specifically transferring land by meets and bounds as opposed to having the work done by a licensed surveyor. 6.9.8 allows for the pre-sale of lots, which is again common with phase subdivisions, and this text here is in line with North Carolina General Statute 160D-807C. 6.9.9, many of these general requirements, or most of them, or really all of them, already exist in the current ordinance, but are just reorganized into this section. 6.9.10, environmental protection. So this section features regulations that are largely in the existing ordinance. However, these changes clarify the definition of marginal land, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Adds a requirement that notes be placed on plats if properties are within a flood hazard area or within a watershed. This section also keeps the 50-foot vegetative buffer requirement that the board had proposed last year after the as a result of the subcommittee. It's section subsection 6.9.10.4. It includes provisions that stormwater not create erosion, and that it, quote, keeps flows below erosive velocities. And that's left over from the last draft. And that perpetual operation and maintenance plans be included with covenants on properties within the subdivision. So kind of like what you were asking about with the open space, and I think you had brought this up the last time we looked at this, some type of agreement that stormwater controls be maintained by the neighborhood. And then finally, subsection 6.9.10.5 would clarify that stream buffers be measured from the top of the bank. 6.9.11. A lot of the same regulations here. They're in the current subdivision ordinance on public and private roads, but it adds a lot more detail on things like postal service cluster box units, fire code standards, the distinction between Class 1 and Class 2 private roads, and the perpetual maintenance of private roads. 6.9.12. Design standards for lots. So this may be worth further discussion. This is kind of where we left off last time. This section features a lot of the same regulations in the current ordinance today, but you will notice that the minimum lot size requirements do not match the 5-acre or the 2-acre minimum example for the ag district or for the rural residential district. At the end of that meeting, that issue was unresolved, and so I did not change it in this draft. Other features of note here, we added a clarification that only one principal dwelling may exist on a single lot, and because this is an issue that we deal with quite often. We have to process these as subdivisions, but we actually get quite a lot of requests that people place multiple homes on a single lot. So it makes setbacks, lot size, road access, it really complicates those factors currently. Section 6.9.13, types of subdivisions. This section more clearly defines the difference between major and minor subdivisions. Major subdivisions would be those consisting of 15 or more lots, while minor subdivisions would feature 14 or fewer. Major subdivisions are then broken into three categories: conventional, cluster, and density subdivisions. Conventional subdivisions would simply match the minimum lot size of the district that they're in, for example, 5 acres in the agricultural district. Clusters would feature lots as small as 8,000 square feet, or in some cases 15,000 square feet, and must reserve at least 25% of the original tract as open space. And density subdivisions would feature lots where, or subdivisions where lots could vary in size, but the average of the lots would match the minimum size in that district. And again, for example, 5 acres in the agricultural district. 6.9.14 spells out all of your details related to cluster subdivisions. And then the final section there, approval procedures, really just consolidates what we have right now in the current ordinance. Approval procedures are kind of in two different places, and this just kind of consolidates it together at the end. And that's all that I've got on the ordinance. Happy to take any questions. But again, like last time, I fully expect you guys take it home, take a little time with it, formulate some comments, questions, and critiques, and we can dig back into it at the next meeting. I think it's worth noting too here, so we're getting kind of to the end of our process, obviously, and the next step would be possibly getting this up to the commissioners for consideration. Obviously, they are knee-deep in the budget process right now, so I think getting something to them prior to July 1 is pretty much a no-go. So we've got this meeting, we'll probably have obviously the June meeting, and then maybe the July meeting to finish contemplating everything we're looking at here before we send the final package up to them.
I had Commissioner asking me what was going on, why we hadn't brought something up, and I explained to him what we said about just waiting till the budget got over and all of this, and he said, well, that might have been a good idea. So, but I have had some of them asking me when we're gonna say something.
Okay.
So I think as soon as this thing's done, we need to be ready.
You let them know we've been working on it, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I told them we've been working on it, and
You should invite them to come to a meeting.
Yeah.
They're invited.
oh yeah.
I rather enjoy when they send somebody.
Yeah,
I think it's good for the process.
It's not sarcasm.
I want to ask one question.
Yes, sir.
It's just a question.
Yeah.
On page 41, under the 6.9.14, the second paragraph, down in the last third section, I guess, of the paragraph, it says, clustering also allows smaller and less costly networks of roads and utilities and reduces the amount of impervious surface and stormwater runoff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I understand that particular statement. If you're going to have a cluster subdivision, it actually increases the stormwater runoff, I would think. It's nowhere for it to go.
Well, think of it this way. Think about just the road, for example.
Okay.
Let's say you create a new subdivision and you have rather conventional lots, or maybe even if they're 1 or 2 acres, right? If you kind of stack them all up, you got a lot more road length to reach all the way to the end of the neighborhood. If you have condensed lots that are as small as 8 or 10 or 15,000 square feet, and you've got the houses a lot closer together, it doesn't take as much road to get to the end of the neighborhood.
So it's more involved in the road than it is for the,
Yeah.
because you've
I
got
mean,
more houses clustered together, you're gonna have more storm runoff.
Right. Well, no, to calculate stormwater runoff, you're talking about impervious surface, right? So,
I'm talking about water coming off the roof.
yeah, road,
Right.
driveways,
Yeah,
rooftops,
sidewalks,
those
whatever.
types of things. So you're going to have the same amount of driveways and rooftops regardless of the design of the neighborhood.
I just don't see it reducing the stormwater runoff, so to speak.
Yeah,
I'm not saying take it out, but I'm just saying it doesn't make sense to me.
sure, yeah.
Well, if you have the houses closer together,
I-
theoretically, you'd have shorter roads to connect one driveway to the next. So if you have shorter roads, that reduces the square footage of the road,
I understand. your
thereby
reason.
reducing the impervious area overall. Now, in a cluster subdivision by lot, the parent lot that it's created from, you'd have less stormwater runoff. But then if you just look in that one area where the houses are versus where the open space is, it'd be more concentrated in that portion perhaps.
Yes.
But overall, you'd have
Yes.
less
You
runoff.
can
The
design it
open
to
spaces,
go off into
the open space is what's gonna reduce your runoff.
So your
What-
roof is
what-
what you're talking about. Your roof,
Houses so close together, so many roofs.
but your roof is going to be into the yard
Yes.
versus hitting the road and running down the road. And there's more of an opportunity for the water off the roof to disperse on a house than it would be on a building like this that is sitting so close to roads and more impervious surface. So when you build buildings like this, you also calculate the roof because it goes to impervious surface. Whereas a house is not as likely to be done that way. So,
See,
and that's really simplifying
Yeah.
our formula.
Henry, when we were working on all of this,
The subcommittee.
Jordan Road, we was working on all this Lake Jordan Road. This is one of the biggest things, the topics that came up on this was this impervious surface. And the way it was first written, just like this business right here was here, this business was next to it. Well, there was too much runoff. They were gonna have to eliminate this business over here so that the impervious surface off of this one, this could take it up. And that's, cause you had to have that open space, and then you had to have these retention ponds, and I mean, it just went on and on and on. But, that's the whole purpose of having this open space, is so that, I ain't gonna tell you it's right, I ain't gonna tell you it's wrong, but if you got 4 acres of houses over here, and you got 10 acres of open land around it, that counts for the reduction of the runoff on that farm, on that piece of property. That's the way it works.
What you're saying is that 8,000 square feet, you have 5 roofs
It's a lot of water.
per acre versus 2 roofs per acre.
Yes. That was my,
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, correct. Just a question, and thank you for the comments.
What you're saying is correct. If you concentrate all your water here, that's gonna change up your potential erosion, whatever and all that. That stuff's gonna have to be factored in there and dealt with. But if you take 100 acres of land and you develop 35 of it and you leave 65 of it open, and you manage the 35 correctly, you're gonna have less of an impact than if you go out there and develop the entire 100 acres in larger parcels. And that's where this is going. Does that make sense?
That's kind of one of the arguments I made on going to the acre to the 2 acres, is that house sitting on 2 acres, it's impervious surface. It can take it up.
Oh, yeah.
It can take it up.
Yes.
Instead of coming over to me
Right.
as a farmer and say, you need to increase your buffer by 50 foot so you can take up for this loss over here. Now that loss is over here is 3 miles from me or 100 miles from me. But if you put it down on paper, it says it's taking it away. Same way on all these creeks and everything, and wetlands and everything. They want to build this piece of property here on wetlands, they can take it out. And then they can go over here and buy his wetlands, and that replaces that over there. You don't have a hill of beans new with nothing, but that's what it,
It's
that's
a third
what
of the
it
way
is.
over.
And
Am I right or wrong?
You're right.
You're right, mitigation credits, yep.
It don't mean a darn nothing, because what they buying may be 100 miles away. But they'll come to you, and I say you, a farmer, they'll come to you and say, we'll buy that land, and we'll give you $20,000 an acre for it. No one talking about, because I live in my neighborhood done that.
Well, okay, moving right along,
Sorry about that.
because we don't want the game to end on us. Anybody got any questions?
I have a comment on that paragraph.
Okay.
The real minor correction, stormwater is one word, not two.
I think stormwater is one of those words where autocorrect hasn't figured it out
It
yet.
hasn't, yeah. I just
You
remember.
type
my-
it in as one word and it tells you it's wrong.
I just
But
remember
then
being
you look at like the
corrected on that in my senior
NCDEQ
presentation
website
in
and it is
college,
all
and
one
I was
word.
told stormwater is one word, not
Yeah.
two, so that stuck with me ever since.
Take it from the engineer. I'll take your advice. I'll change that. I don't know if this may be neither here nor there, but maybe it's important to mention. I think the reason that this language stayed in is a couple of things. If you go back to the purpose and goals, that second paragraph there comes directly from the work that the subcommittee had done. And it says the goal of this section shall include safeguarding agricultural operations, reducing environmental impacts on water resources, reducing impervious surfaces and stormwater runoff, allowing for affordable home options, enhancing community pride and conservation and preservation, and better preserving a predominantly rural development pattern throughout the unincorporated areas of the county. And then the specific language about the reduction of stormwater runoff and all the rest in the cluster, I think that comes almost directly from what the ag extension had put together regarding what they called conservation subdivisions. And so we try to just kind of line that up with what they had put together on the conservation subdivisions and the goals of the subcommittee on proposing the changes.
So just playing devil's advocate here,
Yeah.
is there anything in here that dictates the amount of pervious versus impervious surface in open areas? Other than DENR or whatever they're called now?
You mean in like the preserved open cluster?
Let's just
Space?
say I have paddleboard or pickleball enthusiasts, and I make a subdivision, and my open area is 15 acres of asphalt, play pickleball line, which has then created runoff. I don't see anything in here. That's an exaggerated example, but
I mean, I think
I mean,
that's
what
a
if I-
that's a
you know-
fair question.
what if you're
So page 42 there talks about what the open space can be used for.
and it says recreation parks playground.
Right.
Yeah, but you're saying
Basketball
if you want to pave it as one gigantic tennis court, or pickleball court.
That's exactly
Yeah,
what I'm
there's no mechanism, there's no mechanism that governs the impervious percentage within a given open space of a cluster subdivision.
I'm asking.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Such use may come in the form of parks, playgrounds, recreational areas, picnic shelters, sidewalks, trails, or similar uses conducive to the environment of the neighborhood. So yeah, I think devil's advocate, you could say we're gonna have 5 roller derby rinks out here, and you got a lot of concrete.
Yeah.
It's
Or a
worth.
certain number of feet of trailway that's out of asphalt that
Yeah.
eats up a lot. And
Yeah.
But Alamance County doesn't have a post-construction stormwater ordinance, does it?
We don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the type of ordinance where you'd find those
yeah.
impervious thresholds.
If a developer were to submit something like this to us, and it includes quite a bit of paved surface in the open space, we would say go to NCDEQ and get a sediment erosion control permit as part of the process. That doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
tackle
But
stormwater.
your
That's the
erosion control is
closest-
only your construction stormwater.
That's the closest
Not
thing to,
post-construction
yeah.
stormwater.
So
Right, post-construction.
if you think it's worth it to add a provision in there to require it to be, predominantly natural, predominantly green or undisturbed or whatever,
I'm just listening here to,
do you have
there's-
any particular experience with clusters or
I don't.
any thoughts on this in particular, or you've seen it?
You could set some type of, you could say the open space can't be more than X% covered with impervious surfaces.
Yeah.
Define what that is.
Good idea to put that in there.
Or you could say only a certain amount of the open space land can be used for the recreation.
Mhm.
And
not
limit
And
that.
I mean, that's not something we necessarily need to answer tonight,
Yeah.
but, I mean,
I'm not sure exactly where it's at, but we discussed this, at one point, and the natural areas and the buffers and everything that was being proposed, it was written, we had it written that it had to stay in natural, that buffer or that outlying area could not include like a driveway or any surface. It had to be in natural vegetation.
Mhm.
Do you remember that?
I do remember that. And
I
that
don't-
may still
I don't
be
know where all
intact.
that's at, but I know we talked about it, that either a buffer or a natural area had to be maintained in natural vegetation and could not include even a gravel road. It had, that if you put a road in that area, it would eliminate, it would not be considered as. I know that was talked about, and I thought we had put that in there, it had to remain and that stay natural, with natural vegetation. You couldn't go in there and build a pickleball on it,
I got you.
because
It
that's.
makes, I don't remember that specifically, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah, so if that's in there, that could help.
It looks like it's on page 25. At the very, very top of page 25.
It's a whole lot of rain.
It is, it's kind of nested under flood damage prevention, which it probably should not be. But 50-foot vegetative buffer. Shall preserve natural features like trees, grass, shrubs, ponds, streams.
that's a buffer, that's not an open area.
Right.
That's different. I mean, can I count my buffer as my open area, but I would not be allowed to put my pickleball court there, I could put
That's
it
a-
in the open area.
That's an excellent question. Yeah, we may need to address that vegetative buffer area because the allowance for clusters and it's different than just the simple
Needs
2
to be
acre.
added to that, that part needs, like this
Yeah.
is here, needs to be added to that.
Yeah, I'll
I'm
give
not
that.
saying you shouldn't be able to have a basketball or a tennis court or something like that, because that's recreational area, but,
You just don't want all 30 acres of your
Can't
open
make-
space to be eaten up in
yeah.
courts of some type or something
Saying
else.
how
That-
developers
That
work.
basketball, that court could be counted into your natural area. And then if you go make the natural,
I mean,
if you
can
go
I
make
make,
the natural
can I make my
area,
swimming pool
where it
an open area?
requires,
You know, I
where it
mean,
requires, it has to
A
be. in
community
natural
swimming pool?
vegetation.
yeah, I mean, then I can sell my subdivision as having recreational facilities.
You sure could.
It's a marketing open area.
That'd be nice.
Getting money out of
My daughter would love to grow up in a neighborhood with a swimming
Mhm.
pool.
Yeah, I mean, we can have a natural area, I can charge a premium for, yeah.
Yeah.
I believe, I agree, I mean, I think it needs to be.
Swimming pools don't
in
count as
this
impervious
natural
surface, by the way.
area, it needs
Right.
to be in
That's true,
Water
but
natural
The water area
vegetation.
doesn't.
Not a road, not a gravel road, not a pickleball field.
That's a good point.
All right, I've made a note. I'll dig into that and see if I can come up with something clever by the next meeting.
Forsyth County has something.
Oh yeah. Forsyth County, not Winston-Salem.
It might be Winston.
Oh, come on now. You gotta tell me what I'm looking for.
Hold on now. Because they do make pervious asphalt.
Yeah, that's right.
Don't they though?
Yeah, Purvis concrete.
That's
All
right.
right.
Yeah, they do.
Any other questions on the subdivision ordinance? Like I said, feel free to take it home and look over it a little bit more deeply, and we'll come back at the next meeting and you can lambaste me with your.
It's
That's a
Winston.
whole lot of reading.
It's Winston.
So I had a couple of things, unless we're trying to expedite. Page, I'll skip around a little bit probably as I go through my comments.
Okay.
Page 38. Six point nine, point 12.3, item 6, or no, item 7, the buffer strip. Is it's noted, it says a strip of land, 40.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you should spell out feet.
40
there.
feet.
40 feet should be added. And then I was gonna propose if we want to entertain increasing that 40 foot to 50 foot.
I think that's a good observation. So this is, I don't know that I really thought about this till just now, but this is a carryover from the current ordinance. But it may seemingly be in conflict with the 50-foot buffer that we just talked about if that is the direction that the board wants to go. So we might need to think about ironing that out or making sure that the two become one or that they're separate somehow or something.
And where was that other 50 noted?
The one that Henry just talked about. Page, what was that, 24?
25,
25.
I believe.
The heading is on 24 at the very last
I see.
line, vegetative buffers
Between
established.
said facilities. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, that's right.
But this is, that one's for specific uses.
Yeah,
like
that's
historic
right.
Properties, historical landmarks, farm district, county parks, natural assets, public or private schools, houses of worship.
That's right.
Requires a 50-foot buffer. So it's very specific.
That's true. That's right.
This one's not specific, is it? That's arterials, minor arterials.
Yeah, this is really-
non-residential
Yeah, like roads and then non-residential.
and this is
properties.
non-residential properties, which is kind of a catch-all.
Yeah, I was just thinking, especially between the roads, I thought an extra 10 feet. Like earlier, it just seemed appropriate, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really have any other technical basis for it. Is that something I would need to make a motion on, or do we want to just discuss it, or?
Do you mind kind of summarizing what you mean there or repeating it?
Yeah, so in attempt to make a formal motion, is that what you're saying?
Whether or not there's a motion is up to
Okay.
him. I'm just asking for you to kind of
So I would
clarify.
I thought if we wanted to take interest and entertain increasing that buffer strip of 40 feet, increase to 50 feet, and that would be provided between principal arterials, minor arterials. My main concern was just the distance
So
from a lot to a road, and that's why I was proposing the 50 foot.
I would just say my experience with buffer strips. Does anyone, do they have to plant anything in this, or is it just, it's just you can't build in it and
I don't think there's a specific requirement
right,
that they
you can leave it
plant.
open, it's for you to plant in it if you want to.
Right.
I've gotten to the point with buffer strips in my career is to give flexibility, and not set just one minimum. But if you, 40 feet, 50 feet, in this case, if there's no planting requirement or anything like that,
Right.
what's the point? It just functions as a setback.
I think this was put into the ordinance many, many years ago
Mm-hmm.
because you have conflicting land uses, and instead of entertaining something like zoning, you try to say, okay, well, let's at least make buffers between disparate uses.
Okay. Otherwise, the setback would govern, well, that's your building setback.
Mm-hmm.
So does that 40-foot buffer, is that like a lot setback? Is that how it's functioning? Now that I'm diving into it, I'm a little more perplexed by it.
Yeah, a strip of land 40 feet in width, in addition to the minimum
Minimum lot
required lot
depth.
depth. So
Yeah.
that which
So it's
there's
like a
not.
lot setback.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then
it's
in a
almost
lot, you have your building setback.
it's almost like you have to increase your lot depth.
Yeah,
So you would have like
Oh, you're
80
right.
foot, a 40-foot setback from the buffer
to the
That-
building, yeah.
to the building.
It reads
Yeah.
like you would have to have 40 additional feet of land.
Mhm.
There's not a lot depth requirement. I've made a note that there doesn't. I remember the old subdivision ordinance did have a lot depth requirement, I think.
Really?
I remember having to check it. I hated it. I was going to suggest get rid of that. And lot width is bad, but yeah.
The lot, the width and depth.
In addition to the minimum required lot depth and lot width. Maybe that should say, maybe get rid of that in addition to the minimum required lot depth and lot width.
Yeah.
That makes it sound to me like you have to have an additional, you have to add land to that lot.
So it's got to be, it's got to be included in the law.
That's right. Yeah, this strip shall be a part of the lots. And reserved for screening completing uses.
So if you, like you said, if you increase this by 10 foot, you're gonna have to increase the size of the lot.
So where this would apply is where you have different types of buildings, say a manufacturing warehouse that is beside a residential, is that?
Yeah, that's a little confusing. When I first read it and made this comment, like I said, I was thinking of it as relation between the lot, a person's private lot boundary line versus a road right of way. That was the lens as I was looking at this. So when I first read it, I almost got the impression it was functioning kind of like a street yard width. But now that we're talking about it more, it seems to be more confusing than just that. So I don't know, maybe that whole statement there needs to be reworked somehow or reframed
Yeah.
in some way. Because my first intuition was thinking of it like I said, a street yard. But then as you go through, it kind of.
It reads like, let's say you had a 60-foot wide lot, you were subdividing a piece of property and you're creating two lots, and there was a warehouse over here, and then you had one of your lots here, and you're required to have a 60-foot minimum lot width, but then you have to have an additional 40 feet, so you wind up having, that lot has to be 100 feet wide, rather than it being 60 feet, but then you've got a 40-foot.
But then you would
Vegetative
have
buffer.
your setback, your buildable area would be.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe it would be easier just to have a section like we already have of setbacks for building setbacks. And then some sort of section for buffers, like landscape yards or buffer yards maybe.
Yeah,
And
possibly.
that would
I
kind of
mean,
nix this whole kind of deal, because this is kind of like, as I see this, and we're talking about it more now, it's almost like it's trying to serve as a buffer requirement,
mhm.
and then putting those conditions into a sentence rather than having a nice clean chart.
Yeah.
You know, like in this case,
Residential to
distance. Yeah.
institutional. That's
Right.
what I need.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's hard to put a chart in words sometimes.
sure.
And it seems like that's what that's trying to do. So,
Well, we can try to make a
I'm not
buffer.
gonna make a
We can try to
motion,
make a
but-
buffer chart.
so, I don't know. Maybe there's a better way to frame that.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah.
Like many things with this ordinance,
Yeah.
there's a better way to word it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll just leave that at that then. So,
All right.
yeah.
I'll see what I can do between now and the next meeting.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Page 40. In the middle there, under item number 2, sentence B, the last sentence of that says, this is for cluster subdivisions. It says these subdivisions must retain a percentage of the overall development.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so is that 25% noted in that 6.9?
Yes.
Okay, I missed it, all right,
That's where you can put your pickleball courts.
got it, okay.
It's over here in number 3.
All right, I was gonna ask where that 25% was outlined, and then I just answered one question.
Yeah, and I thought about putting it in there as well.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any harm in repeating it, but
Is that the only value, the only number?
part of why I didn't double it up is if you guys wanted to have any debate about the required open space and increase it. I want to say maybe last time around we talked about 30%, something like that. I did 25 just to bother Henry, so we could definitely change it.
Next.
But, all right, this is just a general question for me. On 22, page 22 on the pre-sale of lots, several of those statements that are referred to, should the final plat differ in any material respect from the preliminary plat? What constitutes material respect? Like what gauges that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It would be, I think I've only really dealt with this once in the many years I've been doing this, but it would basically be, you know, somebody comes in and says, I'm going to create the subdivision and I'm going to have 15 1-acre lots. And that gets approved through the preliminary review process. And then they come back and say, okay, here's my final plat. And now all of a sudden the 1-acre lot is 1.5 or 2 acres or some other dramatically different configuration. That's what I think would be a material difference. It might even be more subtle than that. But basically, if the final plat differs from the preliminary such that what has been, the transaction would be invalidated by the difference, right? Or that the item being sold is so different that basically we couldn't approve it.
Well, this is all written for the protection of the buyer, so this is, I guess they would have to.
That'd be up to them to determine.
I've never dealt with it. In fact, I actually suggested to someone that said, I don't want to do that. I was like, okay. I'm surprised somebody's actually done this.
I've been approached once or twice by somebody who basically says, I've got this, you know, rather large subdivision in mind, but we're going to see if we can do phase 1, get those lots pre-sold, and then the revenue from that is going to help us do phase 2 kind of a thing.
I think this went in the statutes, I think in 2005.
Okay.
And I think it went in there to get around that it's a violation to sell property referencing a plat or deed,
okay.
you know,
That
plat or
isn't
deed
really
that hasn't been
confirmed or
recorded and
recorded.
hasn't been approved. I think this was something to protect buyers that wanted to go into this.
Okay.
That way a buyer doesn't go in thinking they're going to get a 1.25 acres and then end up with a lot that's only 3/4 of an acre for still paying the same money, I guess. Or if they end up with some sort of weird easement or encumbrance on the property.
I'm thinking this is.
I'll have to
fit,
read about
and then this
that.
fits. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we go.
Yeah.
The way it reads is it's a statutory protection for a buyer, and it gives the developer an opportunity to do this instead of that.
So there's no real need then to define what material respect would be. It's just I don't know how you would. You know.
I'm not a lawyer right there.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious.
I think you could reference the statute that talks about that in the violation part, and you know, it's a violation unless you do this.
Yeah, I'll need to take a closer look at this.
I want to do that too.
And I wonder if the verbiage now for what I referenced earlier, 160D-807C, is different from that provision on pre-sale of lots. And I want to say when I researched in the past, the verbiage on the state law level was much closer to this. But now it looks like it has changed. So maybe between when I last dealt with this and now the state law has changed, and maybe we need to address that. So I'll definitely I'll take a look at the state law and maybe reach out to the UNC School of Government or something, do some more research and address that.
Okay. I left page 40 too soon before skipping to on page 40. Let's see, section C. Oh, sorry. Up here. I'm trying to match my notes to what I had marked on the PDF.
You said page 40?
Yeah, page 40. the first paragraph there for major subdivisions. Middle of that paragraph, it says, all other lots must have access provided to them.
Okay.
Take off the ED.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Reading through this statement before I see if I still have a question on it. All right, I'm good. That's all. I'm done.
All right, so that got us wrapped up. Announcements?
I don't really have any announcements. I did want to mention about kind of what we touched on earlier, not overloading the commissioners since they're dealing with the budget, and if we're going to move forward with this, move forward after the budget. But we have a new employee in the planning department. Keyshawn Haith is our new planner 1. He started on Monday and is doing a great job so far. So you may see more of him at planning board meetings.
You say Hayes or Hayth?
Haith.
Hayth.
And that's how you pronounce it, right? Haith?
Yep, Hayth.
All right, well, going back to the minutes, what I was in my mind wanting to move this thing along so we could not lose all of the game. And I just kind of took that and run with it. So I want to abjectly apologize to Mr. King right now when I said, now y'all see why I skipped over the minutes. That was not a jab at you.
No, that's okay.
Point
I didn't take it that way.
Well, I'm just tickled to death to hear that you didn't. But since everybody here heard me say, and they see with me, I wanted to hear me apologize. So,
Did we actually approve the minutes?
yeah, we did.
Yes.
After a fashion. Yep, if somebody make a motion to adjourn, we'll go home.
So moved.
Second. Got a motion and a second. See you back.